Hi everyone, welcome back to Learning Kitchen Live. My name is Giselle and I'm one of the dietitians here at Community Service. Today I have a very special guest here with me, Valerie. She is the manager of nutrition services here at Community Service. We will be making a zucchini lasagna roll-up that is packed with spinach. There's some protein from ricotta, and you get some vitamin C and some fiber from the zucchini as well. Before we get started today, I would like to thank our friends at Boston Scientific for their support of these live cooking demos. And before we move on into the recipe, I also want to bring it up that in the comment section of under this video, below this video, you will find three very important things. The recipe for this, for today's dish. You would also find a handout with the ingredient spotlight of the week, which are herbs, and also a link to a survey that we would appreciate if you can answer it, because you give us a sense of what are you hoping for, what do you want to see it here that in these live cooking demos. So all right, I'm going to be moving over here to start this recipe.
I just want to say I'm super excited about this because I love lasagna, and this is a wonderful, like, lower carb, lighter version of lasagna that really is like family friendly. It's cheesy, it's delicious, it's everything you want in lasagna, but like a super healthy version of it. So
Right.
You're gonna love this.
Yeah, you just exactly what I was about to say. Like, if you like lasagna and you think, when you think of lasagna, you think of like saucy, cheesy, yummy, this is your recipe. So all right, let's get started. We will start with zucchinis because we're gonna make noodles out of these zucchini. So let's talk a little bit about them. At the grocery store, maybe at your backyard, at your garden, you will find zucchinis. They grow, they usually yield or produce a lot. One plant produces a lot of them, and maybe at this time of the year you find them to be a little bit bigger than you wish for. So that might be a good place for this recipe, because you want your zucchinis to be a little longer, to be about like medium to a large size zucchini, and a little wider, so you have those white noodles to make your lasagna. I also want to let you know that zucchini, it's related somewhat to a yellow squash. So zucchini, yellow squash, both from the family of summer squashes. So here we have summer squashes, these two are part of the family, and then we have our winter squashes. The one of the main differences between these two, winter versus summer squashes, is that the summer squashes have tender skin, so we tend to eat the whole product, right? We eat the skin, we eat inside. The seeds, if you see them, they're very soft, you can still eat them. Otherwise, on the other hand, for winter squashes, you know, you have to peel the skin is very hard to eat, and you also have to remove the seeds. They also have a lot more starch, right? So let's get working on this. I will show you a couple of different ways of making these noodles, okay? Because I understand that not everybody would have a mandolin like this at home, right? I'm gonna be using this. The blade that I have it here is an 1/8 of an inch. So ideally you will be making noodles that are about an 1/8 of an inch thick. All right. So let me show you how we go. Just want to make sure that this is really in place, because it's a little dangerous and I don't want to cut myself. I already had a zucchini that I had been slicing earlier, so I'm going to start with this. So first of all, when I start with a brand new zucchini or yellow squash, I would start by cutting the ends of it, right? And because it's round, it might be a little wobbly for me to start slicing. I'm going to cut a little bit of it on the side here just to make it flat and easier for me to start slicing it, or easier for me to start making the slices with a knife. So if you're using the mandolin, here we are. Gotta put a little bit of weight on it. Let's try some of these. All right, so let me show you what it looks like. here we are. So this is your zucchini noodle, right? So it's very thin and very soft actually. So a couple other ways to make this in case you don't have a mandolin, right? And I gotta watch my hand here. Everyone has to be very careful. So with the best of your ability, use a sharp knife and try to cut thin slices. It's much more difficult to get them to be as thin as this when you're using a knife.
Giselle, could you use a vegetable peeler to do this?
Yes, if you have a really good one, you could. I tried to use the one I had at home. It made it very thin. I have one here, I can show you. We had one. But when I tried it a little earlier, it was just, I'll show you what I got. I got slices that look like this. So give it a shot at home. If you have a good one, a good vegetable peeler, you might be able to make your zucchini noodles with that. I wasn't as lucky though. It didn't work for me. So I stick with the mandolin or the knife. All right. So the next step will be, once you have all your noodles, you're looking for about 20 of them, all right? So 2 zucchinis, about medium size, should give you about 20, if not more, zucchini noodles, all right? The next step is to heat it up the oven and cook them in the oven for about 10 minutes at 425. We do that to make them a little softer and easier to roll, and I'll show you why. For example, the one I just made with a knife, I wouldn't be able to roll it. It doesn't really work. Can you see it? It's really difficult. So 10 minutes in the oven, the slices are a little thicker. However, if you find yourself with a thin one like this, you may not need to put it in the oven for 10 minutes because it's thin enough and easy to work with. This is a batch that we made right before we started the show. And then I only cooked in the oven for about 5 minutes because our oven is really powerful. But at home, you should do it for about 10 minutes. Or if you can cut it thin enough, you can skip the baking. All right, so now we are going to prepare the filling for this recipe. So we have our noodles already here. The stuff here. The next step is to start working on the ricotta mixture for our filling. What I would like to do is to show you how to chop some spinach to make this a little easier. If I don't chop the spinach can get a little bit big and stringy in the middle. I just find it to be easier to mixture and have pieces of spinach in every single bite when you chop it before you saute it. So I have a saute pan here heating up. I'm gonna put a little bit of oil. Any oil, canola oil, olive oil, any cooking oil you have at home will be okay. Like roughly give it a chop. Nothing pretty here. We're just trying to make it a little smaller in size.
Could you use frozen spinach, like frozen chopped spinach if you had it?
Yeah, you can definitely use frozen spinach. I will highly encourage you to drain it. Make sure you squeeze some of the water out so we don't make the noodles too watery and the whole dish a little too wet. The next we are going to add, so here are about 2 cups of spinach. Next we're going to add to this oil our garlic. So I chopped about 2 cloves of garlic here, and I'm going to have my friend Val watch it so we don't lose our garlic.
You've heard us say this before, like garlic cooks really quickly and you just don't want it to burn. I'm actually going to take it off the heat because there's enough heat on it. If the garlic burns, nothing bad happens. It just ends up having a little bit of a bitter flavor. All right, tell me when you're ready, Giselle.
I'm ready here. All right,
go.
Can you just,
Yes.
It shouldn't take more than maybe a minute or 2 for you to get all this wilted and soft.
when you cook leafy greens, you've seen us do this before on Learning Kitchen Live. You start out with what looks like more food than you could possibly ever eat, and then it wilts down to nothing.
Exactly. As you can see, I had 2 big handfuls of leaf spinach. And once you see this cooked, it's probably going to look more like a half a cup.
And I bet you could use other leafy greens too. Like I have a bunch of kale sitting at home, and I'm thinking of putting that in this.
Yeah, kale will be a good option. Swiss chard could be another option. If you don't have spinach and you have some parsley or some herbs, you can skip the spinach and just add some herbs for flavoring. All right. So the next step will be to, as she's finishing sauteing this, the next step will be to make our ricotta mixture. So here I have about 1.5 cups of hard skim ricotta cheese. To this, I'm going to add this. I just need to cool off a little bit. I'm also adding the zest of 1 whole lemon, and trust me, this makes a difference. It's really good. I was a little unsure about that initially, but yesterday when I tasted, I think it made a huge difference to have that little bit of lemon zest in there. All right, what do you think, Val? Is it?
I think this is good.
Do you think it's cool enough for us to mix it here?
Yeah. If you move away, because I don't want to burn you. Here we go.
Awesome, folks. So here we are. We are almost done with our mixture. Smells so good.
That lemon zest smells so good.
It's so good. I know, I'm very excited. We have a big group of people that are gonna show up for lunch today. I also, and this is, folks, this is basically the only place where I'm adding salt, right? So this recipe, overall, it's low in sodium, low in saturated fat, and low in carbs, because we're using the zucchini noodle instead of regular pasta noodles. All right, so here we are. Now I'm gonna show you how to make these roll-ups. And so, in order to do that, you start by getting a baking dish about this size. I think this is a 8x8.
8x8 or 9x9.
8x8 or 9x9, and you want to add a little bit, or about 1/2 cup of the tomato sauce or the pasta sauce. You can make your own pasta sauce. I found one at the store that had no salt added. This is a good option for those who are watching their salt. If you have hypertension, or if you have kidney problems and your doctor have asked you to, watch your salt, this recipe is a good recipe for you. This type of sauce with no added salt is really good. Yesterday when I was at the grocery store and I compare the labels, let me tell you that 1/2 cup of this no added salt pasta sauce has 40 milligrams of sodium for 1/2 cup. A regular pasta sauce has 450 milligrams of sodium per the same 1/2 cup. So it's a huge difference. It makes a huge difference when you're creating a recipe. And then if you find it in the end, I'm like, well, I would like a little more salt. It's much, you can always add a little bit of pinch of salt to the recipe versus buying something that already has, it's packed with salt. Because salt is added for to preserve the food. All right, so let's start on this. I am going to add,
Giselle,
yes?
we have a question.
Sure.
What can you do if you can't find a pasta sauce that doesn't say low sodium or doesn't have that little salt?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would encourage you to make something very simple. A little bit of olive oil, a little bit of cooking oil on a skillet, garlic, some fresh herbs. You can just saute all that and use a can of either crushed tomatoes, that have no salt added. I think it's easier to find those than marinara sauce. So no salt added crushed tomatoes or tomato puree, and then you can turn that into your own sauce, and it may take no more than a couple of minutes. So that would be one way of, you know, trying to avoid regular marinara sauce from the store. All right, so here we are. We start by adding some of this tomato sauce to the bottom of the dish. Now I'll show you the magic. 1 zucchini noodle. Let me see, I'm gonna get this out of the way so you can actually see it. 1 zucchini noodle. I have a tablespoon because I want to make sure I'm not doing one, you know, the first ones with too much cheese and then at the end I don't have enough. So a tablespoon, 1 tablespoon like this will give you plenty for each roll up. So as you go, it's pretty easy. You can also do this with your kids. Once, you know, they can help you set them up and roll it. It could be fun. Here we are. You can easily, there we go. And then you transfer to the baking dish. And you keep doing this until you finish all your noodles. So I will continue doing this for you. So I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I'll pass it to Val so she has something to tell you.
We just wanted to talk a little bit about using herbs. You know, if you've watched any other Learning Kitchen Live episodes that we've done, you know we're huge advocates of adding flavor to food without adding salt. And those of you listening may think we are really hyper focused on salt, but it is a huge problem in most diets of Americans. We consume so much salt, mostly through processed foods, but it's hidden in so many places, like Giselle was showing you in the marinara sauce. For anyone trying to watch their salt intake, it becomes really hard. So herbs are a really great way to add flavor without adding salt. And so this recipe has a lot going for it. One is the lemon zest in the ricotta. That is going to add a little burst of flavor and acidity. And I think Giselle added maybe like a half a teaspoon of salt in this whole recipe, which is remarkable considering.
I think it's a little light. It's actually
a quarter teaspoon of salt. So it serves makes so many servings. So it's there's very little added salt in it, which is wonderful. But herbs are another place where you can add a lot of flavor to recipes. And I want to just talk about different herbs and how to store them. So this is rosemary, which is wonderful. I wish you could be here to smell this. It has a woody stalk and these lovely leaves. And an easy way to deal with herbs like rosemary and thyme too is if you want to get the leaves off, you literally just pull them off like that, and then you have a bunch you can chop. So super easy to do. We have basil, which Giselle is going to use in the finished product. It's going to be sprinkled over the top. So this is fresh basil, which is kind of in season right now. It's like you can grow it all summer, but it's definitely a late summer harvest. So if you see it in the grocery store, it's probably inexpensive right now. And then we also have some curly leaf parsley here. You can find curly leaf and flat leaf or Italian parsley. And you know, other herbs that we use all the time here are things like mint, cilantro, thyme, oregano. You can find all of these as fresh, but also as dried varieties. You know, the nice thing about fresh herbs is they add a really good punch of flavor to when you're making dishes, a little bit more so than dried herbs, which are a little more subtle in flavor. But to store, if you're wondering if you get a lot of fresh herbs, or sometimes you buy fresh herbs for a recipe and you don't use them all, the things to do are, first and foremost, store them in the fridge, not basil, but store other things like rosemary and parsley actually in the fridge in a cup of water, and put a plastic bag over the top if you can, and it'll keep in your fridge for probably like a week or two. The other way you can store them is to wash them, roll them in a paper towel, and put them in a plastic bag and put them in the vegetable bin in your freezer. So that'll preserve them. Basil, just so you know, will turn like brownish black if you put it in the fridge. It's from the cold temperature. So you could store it at room temperature on your counter in like a cup of water, almost like flowers, except they smell really good. Or just know that if you put it in your fridge, it may turn brown, but it's still fine to use. If you want to preserve fresh herbs, something you can do is chop them up. I don't have a knife handy, but chop them up, put them in ice cube trays, and just put a little bit of oil in with them and stick them in the freezer. And then once it's solid, you could take it out and store it in a container, and they'll keep for months in the freezer that way. And then you just take them out and use them. You'll have a little oil with them, but they're totally good to use. With basil, if I have an abundance of basil, I'll make pesto with it, which is basically just blending basil, oil, cheese, and garlic, and some kind of nut together in a food processor. We've done pestos on Learning Kitchen Live before. You can probably find a wonderful recipe there. But, again, fresh herbs are wonderful, and just know that if you don't use them all up, you can store them. One last thing you can do is you can dry them. You can hang them upside down if you have a place where they're not going to get dusty or like an animal's not going to get after them. You can dry them and then make your own dried herbs to use throughout the year. So I think Giselle is a master zucchini roller and finished those faster than I could have imagined.
Yeah, so I've been rolling while Valerie had been telling all these fantastic information about herbs. So I'm almost done with this and almost ready to put it in the oven. So I finished rolling, stuffing and rolling them. So now, next, you want just a little bit of sauce on top. Just a little more sauce, just to make it a little more colorful. And you want to top it off with a half a cup of low-fat mozzarella cheese. Everybody gets a little bit on top, and this goes in the oven for about 10 minutes at 425 until it's all bubbly, delicious, and the cheese looks melted. All right, so this is going to go in the oven, and guess what? Here we are, guys. So look what it looks like. It looks really, really good. Can you see? What do you think? So now it's when we put some of these herbs right on top. I really like basil, so I'm gonna go a little nuts, but you can cut it smaller. If you only have dry herbs, would that be okay as well? A serving size for this recipe is about 4 roll-ups. So let me show you what it looks like. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little tricky with the cheese. There we go. So this is what a portion size will look like. This can be your meal, like a light meal on its own. It only has about 15 grams of carbohydrates, so it's very low in carb. And usually we want to, if you follow a low carb diet, it's fine, but 15 grams of carbohydrates can be a little even for someone who lives with diabetes, can be on the lower side. If you want something that's going to bulk up the recipe a little more and give you a little more fiber, a little more protein, you can serve it alongside with a whole grain. The whole grain that I have it here is farro. I love farro, so I'm just going to do a half a cup as a side to go along with that. You don't have to do much, just about a half a cup like that. This is an Italian grain that it's a great substitute for pasta or rice. And this is our Learning Kitchen Live for today. I hope you enjoy it.